just kind of let the conversation flow. So go ahead, Ariel.
Great. Thanks, Paula. Kristina, we're so glad you're here. You're about to be interrogated. That's what it made me think of when Paula said Ariel's going to do the questioning. No, you're not really going to be interrogated.
Yeah, I
Um,
am. It's fine.
uh, we'll see what we
I'm
get in the
so
chat.
distracted by your amazing glasses. I'm sorry. Can we all
Oh,
just like
thank
take a moment
you.
for those glasses? Also, can
I
we also
would
just take a minute?
probably
I
do.
said this in the chat. You all are running a small business here in a way that like my small business cannot keep up with. I mean, you have so many different resources and you're planning so many events and you've opened this up. I mean, I'm just really in awe. So I just want to make sure that everybody here acknowledges how much you are kicking ass right now. So there you go. That's all I
Thank
got.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yay.
Thank you for that.
Yes, and our asses feel it sometimes. Let's see. Why don't we start out with the not elephant in the room, but the subject on everybody's mind, which
Oh,
is our
gosh.
year confab. Obviously, a lot of people know this, but 2023 is going to be the last year for the conference. And yeah, just wondering how it feels just to be saying goodbye to the OG. And yeah, any ideas, thoughts about the decision you made and anything else you want
It's just a thing. I just woke up one morning and I was like, yeah, that's not true.
to
That's not true. This has been an absolutely tortured decision-making process for quite some time. First of all, I'm really sorry. Nobody likes to wake up in the morning and know they're actually going to disappoint like thousands of people across a global field of practice. Like that's not a good feeling at all. And we all knew that that was going to happen, and we like anguished over the communications and how and when we were going to announce it, and I've been going back and forth, second guessing myself for probably a year at this point. I did write about it pretty extensively on the Confab website, and I don't know. I mean, I will talk through it. First of all, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that we're letting people down. We've had a really good run with this event, and it's one of three sort of like larger kind of generalist content strategy events that I'm aware of. The other two are LavaCon that happens every year, and then Tracy Plale's conference in the UK, Utterly Content, which she has grown enormously over the last couple of years. She really made lemonade out of lemons with this pandemic. I'll tell you what, it's very, very impressive. I one of the things is that we have a really small staff. Like people are always sort of like shocked when they find out. I actually have 2 full-time employees and everyone else is a contractor that we sort of like have been working with for years, but it is a small crew, and 2 events a year is burning us out. We just can't do it anymore, and we don't want to grow because we have very, I don't know, we're all old and we have very kind of exacting standards, which is if you've been to Confab, you know that, which is great because we get to handcraft all of our conferences, but it also sucks because I have not done a good job of passing the torch on over the last couple of years. If anybody here would like to take over Confab, I will happily MC for the next 2 years. I will introduce you to all my sponsors. You just let me know. I could talk about this decision for a long time. I mean, I will say personally, I've had some really intense family caregiving responsibilities over the last several years that are not easing up, that I need to be able to step away and pay attention to. But again, an entire conference should not be riding just on me. We did talk to several other people about purchasing Confab, about taking over Confab, and there was another really, really big, this was kind of the elephant in the room that I was really wrangling with. And that is that I don't, even though a lot of people disagree with me on this point, I think that our field of practice needs something new. I think that as a generalist conference, Confab serves a really important purpose. We have 80% first-time attendees. Every year, we have the same companies returning year over year, but it's like people at those companies line up for their turn to come to Confab, which is amazing. But it is a generalist event. And what I have seen over the last 12, 15 years is that as organizations are continuing sort of their individual journeys into content strategy, they're still hiring generalist content strategists, right? And if you're a smaller organization with one website, right, that's okay. They're still going to be super overwhelmed, but it's okay. But what's happening is these large organizations are hiring content strategists, and they're like looking at my book, and they're looking at the Confab site, and they're looking at these, content strategy blogs that have long lists of topics, and they are writing job descriptions that basically mirror the entire extended field of practice. And any human being who is in a job like that knows it doesn't work. And I don't want to have an event that is called content strategy that implies that it can or that it should. And as you can see, as I'm talking about this is really ultimately what is driving this decision, because it is my strong opinion that if we're going to have a generalist conference, it should be a very large conference with very specific tracks. We should have a content design track, a content engineering / structure track, content marketing, did I say content design? I said content design. Content strategy for websites should be one, and then content ops. Because those are 5 very specific sets of roles and partnerships that exist within an organization that all do have to work together. But I think it is time for the ongoing growth and maturity of our field and our industry to really start talking about those 5 areas of practice as worthy of time and attention and resources, the same way we do with project management or research or design. Because it's 5 things. It's probably more than that. I probably missed one. So that's my 5-minute rant, 10-minute rant about Confab. That's what I got.
Well, here. That's really kind of music to my ears. It's wonderful to hear just the reality of our jobs being so much more than what we could feasibly do, like in one track, right? And the idea that each individual track merits attention, I think is really important.
I can no longer contribute to the idea that a content strategist should do all of those things in one day. We're all too burned out. Like, I just want to start talking about these separate but related roles and the way that content ops in particular needs to be coordinating and pulling them together. I'm super excited about the direction that we're going in. Because don't get me wrong, I'm also really pissed off that we're shutting down Confab. Don't get me wrong. I got a lot of anger in there, which is funny because it's my decision. But yeah. Anyway.
Sure, there's many emotions around it. Yeah.
There are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That actually kind of leads me to my next question, which has to do with operations, which is definitely one of my personal pet subjects. I'm definitely excited to see how this evolves over the next couple of years. And I'm curious, 2 things. One, for everybody who's maybe not as familiar with content ops, how would you define it? And then where do you see the future of it?
Mm-hmm. So I'm so excited about this field. I feel like there are 2 people that have been working really hard to launch conversations about content ops, Rahel Bailey and Rachel McConnell. And if you're not familiar with their work, I do encourage you to seek it out. They're both very, very smart and have really been kind of beating the drum about this topic. It's been what I've seen, I think a lot of us have seen, is that content strategy, content design has been 10, 15 years behind design as like a practice. And then maybe 6 to 7 years behind research. And now content is coming up. And so there's a pretty, specific practice of design ops and framework. Research ops also is on the rise. Content ops has got to be there as well. And it is, in my opinion, where if we're going to talk about content strategy as a framework, which is the guiding principles, the voice and tone guidelines, the content models, the accessibility guidelines, the terminology lists, the sets of the tech stack that we're using to sort of like oversee, manage author content. That stuff is the beating heart of an organization, and that stuff should be sitting in content ops. Alongside of that, I do believe that content ops has a responsibility to both define the necessary roles within an organization, figure out how to craft those into jobs, and then also make sure that folks who are entering into the practice, into the group across the organization, have a career path, that there is a growth path for them. So they're not just like the content strategist that maybe you get to be a senior content strategist, but you know, there are the organizations that are really mature are moving content strategists into director of UX, director of UX ops, you know, VP of UX. They're moving into VP of content strategy if that is a field, you know, product manager. I mean, so I really feel like as a centralized service, whether it is in pockets of an enterprise or within, you know, the heart of an enterprise itself, that set of tools and rules and principles and guidelines and rules has to all sit together. So people, process, tools,
People, process, tools. Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Jenna actually had a pretty interesting question about a specific situation that is kind of opsy. She is curious what advice you might have for navigating how the product experimentation that a lot of companies do, the rapid fire experimentation,
Yeah.
can affect your help and support documentation and that flow. They've done some degree of strategy around it, trying to maybe say, if it affects more than 50% of the audience, then we make a change to our help document. If it doesn't, then we don't make a change. There's risks on both sides. And she's curious if you had any thoughts about what kind of strategy might be taken against that particular problem.
I'll tell you what. It so happens that the guy that lives 2 doors down from me sat on, I'm trying to figure out if I can say names of organizations. I don't think I can here. He was one of the first 12 people to sit on an extraordinarily important product within the field of design. That's all I'm going to say about that. And he has watched that product spin into just this giant behemoth, both as a platform and also as, you know, staff and features and the community, the support for the community has basically just a little bit been decimated because the help documentation has not been able to keep up. And because they have not adequately staffed the community support, you know, where you go in and like ask a question or cry on a forum and somebody comes in and they're the authorized responder. They haven't kept up with that. And it's not a customer-centric organization. It's just not. They just don't invest. So the first thing I would say is, and this is, everything for me comes back to leadership principles. If you have leadership that is concerned about caring for customers over time, right? What they need to do is get you more resources and to have specific ownership within areas of the help documentation. Because in that sense, and I will also say as a caveat, I don't know how quickly you're talking about your team moving. Like if you're rolling out new features every, 10 to 14 days, I don't have the answer for you. Like you need a small army to be able to keep up. And also I think some kind of like a scale weighting the importance. Because right now it sounds, I'm feeling I'm being a little rambling on this. Right now it sounds like the way that they're weighing importance is by user characteristics versus user needs, right? Like they're saying if this affects more than 50% of the kind of users we have versus the importance of the task, then that's a problem too. So that brings me back around to your actual question, which is how does that kind of rapid iteration, what are the kinds of things that can help improve workflow and protect integrity of help documentation? Am I reflecting that back correctly?
Yes, Jenna, pipe up if it's not correct, but it sounds about right to me.
So, right. So I think that it's probably just the basics. It's visibility into what's happening. It's being empowered to say, I think this is important and does need to be addressed. It's being empowered to say, we need to hold off 24 hours on this because we don't have the resources to be up to speed. And this is, you're not sunsetting this other feature, you're not fixing this bug, and that's going to affect the other 49%. And again, that comes back to principles. Like if you're not empowered to, assign the resources or slow down the line of production, I don't have a better answer for that. I mean, if what you're looking for is like the right technology, I don't have that either. I feel like I just talked for 5 minutes without answering your question. I'm sorry, and I feel your pain.
Yeah, it does sound like just a challenging position.
Yeah.
I mean, Jenna mentioned she's excited about the frequency and that she's excited that the product is innovating and growing the way that it is, but that
Right.
it really prevents some problems.
Absolutely. And I think that visibility and, just being kept in the loop, as things are progressing and making sure that somebody from the team, I mean, you kind of need a project manager for the help documentation, right? And if it's just the writers that they're asking to prioritize, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what you're dealing with, I think, is a human problem. I don't think it's a technology problem, and I don't even believe it's probably a workflow problem. I think it's how many people are involved, and are they talking to each other in the ways with the routines and that they should be.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think the next question I wanted to bring up is one that it's an interesting one. Chihua brought this up, and they say, my content design teammates are so focused on the words that they often don't question the problem or the flow, the interaction, I think is what they mean, when given a task. I think this perpetuates the writer-editor role of the content designers. How can I get them out of this copywriter mindset without being offensive? And I think maybe that's about contributing to the design process.
What a really great question. I think that my first question is, do they kind of understanding what's holding them back in the first place? Because it may be a thing that I have seen a lot among UX writers is just straight up imposter syndrome. It may be that they're concerned about speaking up about larger problems because they haven't, I don't know, maybe they've tried to bring them to the table previously and been smacked down or ignored. And so anyway, there may be some kind of like it's not my job to solve the problem. That's another problem too, is if people are just like, not my job, getting at that as well. I think that, I think that one of the biggest things that you can do to get people out of their comfort zone and thinking about, like you said, the actual kind of problem and the task at hand is to push them with questions. Just to, and it's not just, well, what do you think about that? Or why don't you tell me more? But it's, why do you think that is? What data do we have, to back up that it is like this word that is a problem? Let's take a step back and look at the actual flow. Let's start with the task. Talk me through it. Let's put you in the user's shoes, right? Because that's the nice thing about using a product is that it's pretty freaking easy for all of us to step in the user's shoes. For most products that we're working on, as long as we can like step back from our words and our deliverables. But just to like continually kind of coax them to see things through the user's eyes and helping them frame up the problem versus pushing them to like come up with, like posing the problem to them and pushing them to come up with the answer. Does that make sense? So it feels a little backwards, but that's kind of what I have seen in terms of just like, I'm not going to hold your hand and walk you down this path. I'm going to like open up the door and invite you repeatedly to go through it. That's probably my recommendation. And the other thing too is I think the more that you can get writers into user testing so that they can see what's going on, when, why, how, where, with whom, the more that you can put them in touch with researchers, and the more that you can have them, even if they're not directly contributing, but sit in and listen in or listen to recordings of design collab meetings, those are all really helpful tools as well.
Yeah, definitely have found that in my own career. The closer I get to the user and the closer I get to actual verbatims, the more I feel like I can empathize with them. Very, very has been super important in my work for sure. I
Yeah,
take
yeah,
kind
and
of,
I do
yeah.
think that, and I do think that the skill to focus on here is setting up the problem statement too,
Mhm.
right? Like you have to be able to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve before you go in and change the copy. Versus just, oh, they didn't like those words, let me come up with a different voice and tone, or let me choose this word instead.
Yeah.
I've been working with my designer for 15 years, and we are just now figuring out, instead of me going in and like, make the logo bigger, like being able to say, here's the problem that I have. Can you please offer me a couple of solutions?
Yeah. The test kind of added on to that a little bit that they'd like to ask a little bit more about stakeholder engagement in general, including how can we get people to care about what we do or to get buy-in? And you sort of addressed that a little bit in, what you just said, but as the broader topic, right? How do we get people to
Yeah,
care?
yeah. I have to say that over all my years of speaking at conferences, anytime we open up questions to the audience, that's one of the questions. How do I engage people? How do I get them to care about the words? How can I demonstrate the value of my work? How can I sell in content strategy and content design? It is a huge upward climb for a lot of people. I think that the simplest thing that I can tell you, because it's not what I've seen does not work, is when you put together a deck saying, here's what we can do for you, or here's demonstrating the value, or even here's a little case study of what I did, and then pounding the pavement and showing people over and over and over the same thing. I have not seen that work. I've seen one of two things work really, really well. The first one is finding out either what's keeping people up at night in terms of just like challenges that they've been asked to solve, a pain point that keeps coming up, or how they're being measured in terms of their performance and their success and their raise, and then craft your pitch to that.
Hmm.
So find out like what are their metrics of success, then come to the table to say, I can really help you by contributing, X, Y, or Z, so that you really are tailoring your sales pitch to each individual that you're looking for buy-in, or each team that you're looking for buy-in. It's more work, but it pays off, because when people can see their problems in what you are doing specifically, the light bulb will go on. But it's a personality thing. It's not just a here's what content can bring to the design process, or content design or content strategy. The second thing is, and people talk about this all the time, find your sponsors, find your allies. There are people in larger meetings whose eyes you see light up, or who agree with you, or who ask, engaged questions. Go talk to those people. Ask them who they have influence with. See if you can get a seat at a meeting with whoever they've got influence with. Ask how can I talk to and help demonstrate my value to these other people, because those are your champions internally, right? Those are kind of my two tips. Oh, the last thing is, if you are able to have or establish any kind of like a community of practice within your organization, or even, with folks around town or outside of your organization, invite people into that, right? Even if it's just like 15 minutes, like, hey, I'm having a happy hour, or I'm having a brown bag lunch and learn, or whatever, and come sit in. If you're not into it, you can leave, but I'd love to engage. So like finding ways to bring people together too. Yeah, exactly. The best way to get somebody to care about what you do is to care about what they do. That's exactly right. That's what I'm saying. When I'm saying like what hurts you or how is your performance being measured, that's like low-hanging fruit. If it is about identifying what somebody else's principles are and finding out how the work that you're doing can support realization of those principles, that's even better,
Yeah.
depending on who the person is. Yeah.
Definitely. I've also found that finding your sponsors, finding your allies is a really important piece.
Yep, totally.
I'm bringing content design to a team anew. And so I've, definitely experienced some of those trials and tribulations. And the success has really come from finding my champions and
Yep,
engaging
great,
them.
great.
Yeah,
Yep.
been good. Um, Kind of related. They were wondering if there's any tips for engaging with product and the rest of the UX team when you're the sole content person. And so I think maybe that speaks a little bit to, gosh, how do I handle a million projects, perhaps?
Yeah, we have an amazing talk at Button about this that is really about setting boundaries and learning how to say no and getting permission from whoever you're reporting into to say no. And sometimes that is like a very concrete, here's how I am establishing prioritization of the requests that are coming in. I have a scale, and I have, even I've seen some people very, very simply have like an Airtable grid or a Google Doc where it's like, all right, enter your thing here, or a Jira ticket or whatever. And it's like, say, is this a make or break thing? Is this a dependency that's going to, bring everything to a screeching halt? Is this a nice to have? Is this your opinion? Right? So being able to help folks differentiate very, very quickly, what is this? Because it does kind of force people to say, oh, I'm really irritated by that, but we could still launch without, like derailing anything. So that I think is part of it. But yeah, the only, and I don't know who you report into, but really the number one person to be able to work with in terms of like setting those boundaries, coming up with a system that allows you to prioritize and allows you to say no, is whoever your manager is, or or even finding like sponsors within different product teams. But I see over and over, this is how content starts within so many product organizations that were, not born on the internet. That have been doing software or whatever for 20 years. Content starts with, okay, we're going to hire a content strategist who writes the words, right? And that person becomes an order taker to 5 different product teams. Scott Kuby had a hilarious / depressing post on LinkedIn that is like a fake job description. Did you all see that? It is just, the thing is, I had just been yelling about a job description like that the other day, and I was like, it's this. And the moral of the story too is that if you're not getting the head count, if there isn't a plan to grow, if you're just being told, suck it up, this is your job, leave. Like, there are a lot of, I know we are all seeing layoffs, but there are a lot of freaking companies hiring. Like, this is like one of the top 10 quickest growing jobs in the UK. And I think we're going to start seeing that here in the US as well. So if you're not getting what you need in an organization, go work somebody else and go work somewhere else. And I know that sometimes is easier said than done, but you are valuable. Your skills are valuable. You do not deserve to be driven into the ground by 5 different product teams who, all have unrealistic expectations of you and no one to back you. It's not fair.
Yeah, definitely. In a related vein, Laura asks about navigating situations that are constantly changing is in terms of leadership, team remit, team structure, or sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, self-care, it is so impossible for me because we do events, but then we also have a pretty robust consulting practice for content strategy in particular. And we do work mostly with websites and content ops at this point. And so we started this giant project that took 6 months to sell in. And we started it in February, and the day before kickoff, the project owner was like, I'm changing businesses within the organization. So here's this person you've never talked to and who did not give a crap about the project. So I see that happen both to folks internally and folks and people who are trying to like help organizations as clients. And it is just self-care, and it is trying to understand, because also your performance metrics change. You have to reestablish, trust with your new manager. I wish I had a magic answer for maintaining sanity, as the sands are ever shifting beneath your feet, but I don't. Just, yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard. It's really hard. I love you, man. And I support you.
I know that is a really hard situation.
Yeah.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts
Yeah.
about it. It's just a
Yeah.
toughie.
Oh, I will say one thing that I think is really useful is make sure that you keep track of your tools and your documentations and your deliverables and the research that you've done and the projects that you've done, and carry that with you as you go, and make sure that other people are seeing it and that you're surfacing it as you go. Because the amount of redundant work that I see within organizations, because somebody was in one department and then they left, and then this spectacular document, guiding principles, voice and tone guide, robust content audit that they'd been working on for 18 months gets lost in the shuffle, and then somebody starts all over again, is often. So just make sure that people know what you're leaving behind, or take it with you.
Nice. Yeah, that's heartbreaking when work happens over and over again. We see it a lot, for sure.
Yep.
Going back a little bit to what we were talking about initially with respect to the fact that the idea that there's a content strategy generalist is kind of an outdated idea. Vanetta really wanted to find out, how do you actually find out what your special sauce is? How do you figure out which area you focus on, and which is a better fit for your skills? Or do you really be proficient in all of these things?
That is a really great question. And I do want to clarify, I wouldn't say that content strategy generalist is outdated, because I still feel like there are people who are content strategy generalists who are still doing really great work within their organizations. I just think most of them are really burned out. And so I don't want to invalidate the idea of content strategy generalist as a position or as a role. I mean, I was a content strategist. I still am in many ways a content strategy generalist, right? It's but I'm just saying it's not sustainable over time. That's really what I want to say.
Okay.
And that I think that there are opportunities and growth paths now that content strategists just simply didn't really have 3 years ago, 4 years ago, which is thrilling to me. And so that comes back around, how do you figure out what your growth path is? I think, there is such one amazing thing about anybody within these different fields of practice within sort of this larger discipline of content strategies, that people are so freaking generous and kind-hearted and want to share experience, want to support people, want to lift others up. That's a unique thing. And I see it over and over and over with our events. And I see it on LinkedIn, and I see it on Twitter, even though it's kind of a cesspool at this point, but I do see it, right? I see people stepping up. And so really, one of the very best ways is to just ask people, what do you do? What do you, what are you passionate about? What part of content design do you like? Why do you want to be an independent contributor versus a manager? Or even just paying attention to yourself, right? I think that, for example, I have a very dear friend who freaking loves spreadsheets. She loves spreadsheets. She's way more comfortable in spreadsheets than she is in content requirements documents, in in Figma, in guiding principles or governance frameworks. And so she does content modeling. She does content structure, because that's the tool that helps her organize her thinking the best. And that's what she loves. If you love a turn of phrase, if you're very specific about word choice, if that is coupled with wanting to solve people's problems, understanding, task prioritization, love of exploring new products, apps, that you can't help but critique or edit or come up with new ideas. Content design is probably a really great area for you to go in. If you are really comfortable in the enterprise environment where you're constantly why isn't this person talking to this person? I'm going to facilitate that connection and that communication. why hasn't this person over here seen this work that's being done over here? And you're kind of like into like sleuthing and problem solving and connecting across any size company, right? Content ops is probably something for you to be interested in pursuing. So it really is like paying very, very close attention to what sets you on fire. Like, what are you going to stay up late working on? Like, what particular part of a project are you just like, I had to work on all this other stuff, but now I get to do this part of the project, right? Like, identify which field that really is like rising in. And I do think that like somebody's got to put a stake in the ground and say, here's kind of where, but at the same time, you don't want to gatekeep across different fields, right? Like, friend who does spreadsheets, I also will do content requirements if required, whatever. But that's really like understanding what gets you out of bed in the morning and understand the kinds of problems that you like to solve in particular. Because there's lots of creative expression anywhere in any part of content strategy, even in the technical stuff. It's, that's like the creative drive to build stuff and to organize and to categorize. So like, where does your creativity draw you? That's I think the best way to sort of find your way.
Yeah, well said.
And then learn how to read a job description, because that was the other genius thing about Scott's post is that, and this other, I'm going to write a follow on. He just beat me to it. I have a blog post. I've been collecting job descriptions where it's like super duper rich, interesting, complicated things you're going to be working on. Write and edit all the copy. More interesting things a bit, and it's just like the bait and switch, because that's what they're going to end up doing. So learn to read job descriptions too.
Yeah, that's good advice. I definitely remember when I was looking for my next role, I really parsed those job descriptions pretty with a fine-tooth comb.
Yep.
And it really helps.
It's important too. And to press in the interview too. I mean, you get to ask as many questions as the person interviewing you does about the nature of the job. And even saying like, what percentage of the job is writing? And if they're like, like 50%, no, 90, right?
Right.
Because everybody needs the words. Because that's the other thing. And, everybody's been saying, we all know this, like, everybody thinks the words are easy. Everybody's like, well, I can write. How hard can it be? So, we're going to kick the words over to this other person and it won't take them that long, which is patently untrue. And I'm preaching to the choir here, obviously. But like, just keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for organizations that don't get it, because you'll get sucked into it.
Yep, and then you'll be the one trying to make everybody else get it.
Well, and that's exactly right. And when I see that in a job description too, if part of the job description is advocating for your work across the organization, no, your manager should be advocating for your work, right? You don't bring somebody in and tell them, okay, go make your job a success by convincing other people that you have value. That sucks. You shouldn't be put in that position. No.
Big ol' no.
Yep.
Ben asks, given the evolution of the field, kind of what we've been talking about, the different areas of focus, and the 4 to 5 tracks that you mentioned, what books do you feel need to be written? Obviously, Rachel just wrote a great one about content ops. We've got Natalie with her great book about going solo to scale.
Right.
What are we missing? What needs to be written?
There's so many good books. I mean, it's almost like I can tick off every topic that comes to mind. Like, we do need a book about building a culture of content within an organization. And Beth Dunn wrote a book called Cultivating Content Design. We needed Natalie's book desperately, and like every human being on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, should read this book about, she's got a very specific blueprint for, you're the only person, here's a blueprint to follow to be able to scale up a practice, or the only couple people or whatever. I mean, Carrie Hain wrote a really great book about connected content and structured content. I think Rachel's book is a good primer. I think that we are going to need I think we're going to need an entire body of literature around things like setting up a governance framework. I mean, Lisa Welchman's book, Governing Chaos, is a great, Managing Digital Chaos, is a great book, but it's also 10 years old, right? And content as a discipline within organizations has radically evolved. So I think that we're going to need a whole body of work there around, setting up governance principles, identifying, how to craft workflows within organizations, understanding, how to define and prioritize roles within. So like a content ops book like this, as far as I'm concerned. What else? I feel like there have been a couple of really great, Andy and Michael's book on UX writing, and obviously Tori's book on UX writing, both great. I think that we are going to need additional books around that continue to kind of come out and push the practice forward, especially because I feel really strongly that UX writers, they're kind of being turned out without really solid bases and foundations within content design. That's a challenge too, because those folks are getting put in positions where there is no growth path, right? They're people want them to do the words. And so I feel strongly about having some kind of a book that is really grounded in those content design principles and activities and skills. I could go on. Why do you want to write a book? Who asked that question? You should definitely write a book.
Yes, they should.
Yeah. I think that there probably also needs to be another, like Aaron Kassain wrote The Elements of Content Strategy, which was just a genius foundational book for the field. And it's likely that somebody else needs to write another book that's like, I feel like I'm saying this and everybody's staring at me. Here's the book that sort of like shapes what this field could look like moving forward. So, yeah. Maybe just a blog post. Maybe somebody just could write a blog post about that.
Yeah, just a little tiny blog post about a little tiny subject.
That's right. That's right.
Moving in a little bit of a different direction, one of the things that I have been participating in a conversation around, and I know a number of other folks have mentioned in their comments, is content patterns and content in design systems. And really trying to get that a little bit more seated into design systems. One of our questions is if you have a book rec for content and design systems.
That's a book that needs to get written right there.
Yeah.
I feel like somebody is writing that book, and I cannot remember. I feel like somebody's writing that book already. Yeah, that's a really great book that needs to be written. And I will tell you, I actually tweeted that I reserve the right to say I don't know. I am not the person to talk about content and design systems. I can point you to the same few examples online I think that everybody else has. That is a thing that I look to others to learn. My background and my deep expertise is in content strategy for website, not in content design, which is why I host Button, but I don't speak at Button. It's an honor to be able to host that community. We do have a talk on content and design systems. Just saying, it's going to be about.
Oh, that's exciting. That's very exciting. It's definitely.
It is. I'll tell you what. If we can get there with content components and like aligning them and being able to connect the dots between how the two really relate to one another, so that as people are considering design components, they're not just considering character count. Like that's the holy grail, right? I'm not sure that tool exists for us yet. And frankly, not unlike Figma, I've been saying recently, I really credit Figma with helping to sort of raise the profile in a skyrocketing kind of way of content designers, because they're right there in the tool. I don't know if it's going to happen in Figma or another tool, but maybe that is going to be part of the path there.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a really great talk at Config, which is Figma's own little conference that they do.
Yep. I watched a bunch of those videos.
Yeah, weren't some of those fascinating? And there's the person from, I believe, Singapore, who had come up with a basically an entire content system in Figma that componentized content and that people could plug and play. It was pretty fascinating. Kind of non sequitur again. Michael asks, what content problems are specific to governmental organizations? And since they're not competing with others, how can governmental content folks begin to work together to overcome those challenges together? Just a small.
It is too late in Central Time for me to get. That is like a whole conference. What you just asked is a whole conference. I mean, how is it different? You know, what we see in government is it's like your audience is everybody. That's how what you do is different. You know, how do you like say, okay, the IRS website, here are priority audiences. It's like, okay, individuals, that's one of our priority audience. So, I mean, that's the primary thing, I think, right, is being able to like get at those user top tasks. I keep saying top tasks. I'm such a like fan of Jerry McGovern and top tasks. It's so simple, but so genius. But how do you get at what are people coming to the website to do, and to get out of their way to help them do that is so, I mean, that's a common principle, but like nowhere else but government is it just like people's day-to-day lives and you're trying to serve all of their basic needs as citizens. And you know, I think that like the research requirements within government are so tremendous, like just ongoing research and testing. And if I see that is a place that I just don't, I see a lot of organizations kind of like trying to guess and solve that stuff themselves, or even with just like basic data analytics, like how many page clicks did this get? Maybe we should pay more attention to this page. I think that's a huge challenge, is keeping up with that data as well. In terms of visibility of best practices, you know, ask UK government digital systems. I mean, I'm actually speaking to their team tomorrow, and I'm just like, I don't know what I'm going to say to you that, you know, you all should talk to me. I mean, they have figured out so much, and it's not perfect, obviously, but they've figured out so much in terms of standardization across websites, you know, internally roles, governance frameworks, etc., research, ongoing data points, ongoing user testing. It takes discipline and alignment across, you know, these different functions of government, which is, we've got so much of that in the United States right now. It's just amazing.
It is. Time. It's absolutely amazing. Yep, one of those.
Yes to Sid Harrell and Bill Hunt. Sid Harrell, Bill Hunt, and Dana Chisnell is another one, and Cara DeFries, who's also speaking a button, is another one.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of coming up on time. The one other question I kind of wanted to ask you really kind of rolls us all the way to the beginning, which is I've often wondered, and I know other people have often wondered, how you managed to accomplish so much and also have a family and also have a life. What are your tips and tricks for balance? Saying no might be one of them. I'm going to
burst into tears right now. It is not easy. I will tell you that the human beings I work with are some of the, I tried to thank them on stage at Confab this year and started ugly crying. It was really uncomfortable. Are some of like the most just like forgiving, patient, capable, generous, talented human beings. And I mean, that's, some of them we've all worked together for between like 8 and 15 years, right? Like that, I would not be able to function without that. I pay somebody to clean my house. I've paid somebody to clean my house for 20 years and I have zero shame. I mean, I think you have to, a big part of it is you kind of have to choose where you're going to put your energy, right? I mean, especially as I have aged, there are friend groups that I have exited because there are other friend groups that feed me and hold me up, suck me dry. I mean, there's a lot of personal stuff. I go to therapy every freaking Friday morning, you know, and just because I need that hour that's just literally all about me with no guilt. And I need my therapist to kick my ass, not take my bullshit. That also helps. It has been really, really, really hard. It is really hard. And it's the people that you are lucky enough to be able to surround yourself with really, ultimately. And also I have like the best job in the world. That also helps. Like, how freaking privileged am I to have the job and the jobs that I have? It's really extraordinary. I mean, this is having fallen into content strategy. And especially like my 18-year-old is a senior now. And so we were talking about college and stuff, and I'm just like, it's very, very possible that like whatever job you end up loving and committing to doesn't even exist right now, because it didn't for me when I was in school. So yeah, I have to tell you, nobody has ever asked me that in a public Q&A before, ever. Just the first time. Yep.
Aw. It's such an important thing, I think. The idea that the fact is that we're all working really hard and we're all striving for balance. And it's an ongoing challenge. And I think
we're all burned out because the pandemic was traumatic. I know. And I cannot say this with enough clarity. If you feel sucked dry by your job, get out. Don't stop trying to make it work. Stop waiting for things to change. Like, your life is too short and there are too many opportunities for you right now. Get out. Just don't stay there, because it's just not worth it.
I love that. I love that. Good advice. Larry,
that's what I'm going to leave you with. Everybody quit your job. Right? Just go home and quit. We'll quiet quit together. It's going to be fantastic.
It'll be perfect. Yeah. I did. I was on a panel at Perspectives about burnout, and that was kind of my message too.
Oh yeah.
Get the hell out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I recognize, especially with people with a family and, who are already like so taxed, finding a job is no joke. Like, that's a part-time job in and of itself. You deserve to feel supported. Like, I have felt it has been a crazy, chaotic, sometimes traumatic several years for me, and I have always had good support, always. And that is just, you can't beat it.
Beautiful thing.
Yep. See, Alexandra's hiring. Go talk to Alexandra. She's hiring. Yeah, exactly. Michael, Michael, you're exactly right. It takes a lot of privilege to just get out. And that's what I'm trying to acknowledge. That anyway, I'm sorry. I know I'm going to take us over time. But yes, absolutely.
That's fine. I'm sure we'd love to stay all night. So no worries at all.
I know. I could continue the conversation forever. But yeah.
Larry, really? Wow. I would have to definitely stop talking within 5 to 10 minutes, because I lose all interest in myself at some point. And I want to know, I really want to read this chat. Like, I haven't been able to read it, and
I'm saving it, Kristina.
I'll send you all. Are you? Because I want to talk to you all and hear from you all. That's another great thing about a conference, is that I get to just be quiet and listen when I'm not on stage.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining, everybody. It's an honor to spend this hour with you, for sure.
Yeah, thanks everybody for all the great questions. I really appreciate it. And Larry, I'll have you wrap us up, bring us home.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for coming. I guess I'll wrap just by saying you can see Kristina again on October 9th. I don't think you have to be registered to Button to come to our meetup reception. No,
everybody needs to come to the Content Strategy Meetup. I'm going to be there.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So that'll be your next chance to, and if you haven't registered for Button yet, I think there's still time. I'll be there looking forward.
We've got what? We got 3 weeks. We have 3 weeks, and we have a good discount code too, right? I mean, you can come join us in Seattle.
Right.
We'd love to see you.
I don't have that handy right now. We'll drop it in the Slack.
Yes. You can come join us at the Westin in Seattle. You can join us virtually. We've got recordings that you can purchase, just the recordings. We have a lot of companies who have really large teams and are like, how do I pick who gets to go? We have what's called a Learning Together Pass, where you can share recordings, do single streaming sessions. Everybody comes. We got Button for everybody. That's what I'm trying to say to you. Everybody comes to Button this year, or Button comes to you.
I did find our discount code, so I just posted that in the chat for
folks.
Thanks.
So grab that and register. Thank you, Kristina. That was wonderful. Thanks for staying up late too. We really appreciate it.
9:03. I'm telling you, for a Midwesterner, I had my
Kristina-
supper at 4:30. That's not true.
We won't make you stay, but I'll keep the Zoom open for just another couple minutes so people can grab that discount code. So
That's great.
Great.
And maybe I'll go off camera and read this amazing chat because everybody's the best. How about that?
There you go.
All right.
Thanks,
Bless
everyone.
your hearts. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate
Thanks
you.
so much, Kristina.
Bye.
Bye.